The dust swirled across the barren plains like a vengeful specter as Wilhelmina Hartwell clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest, the stagecoach that had delivered her to this forsaken patch of earth already disappearing into the haze. Standing alone at the edge of what barely qualified as a town, she squinted into the punishing sun of summer 1878, wondering if she had made the most terrible mistake of her 22 years of life. The letter in her pocket, creased from countless readings, had promised something different. Thriving cattle ranch with prospects for growth, Logan Andrews had written in his surprisingly elegant script. What stretched before her now was a collection of weather-beaten buildings, surrounded by cracked earth that seemed to cry out for mercy. Dust coated her throat as she swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. She had traveled all the way from Boston after answering his advertisement for a bride. 3 months of correspondence had convinced her that this cowboy from the Wyoming Territory offered the fresh start she desperately needed after her family's financial ruin. "Miss Hartwell?" The deep voice startled her, and she turned to find herself looking up at a tall figure silhouetted against the merciless sun. As he stepped closer, she took in the weathered face, the lines around eyes that had seen too much sun, and the quiet dignity in his bearing. This was not the smooth-faced gentleman she had imagined from his letters. "Mr. Andrews?" she asked, her voice small against the vast emptiness surrounding them. "Yes, madam." He removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat, streaked with early strands of gray at the temples. "I apologize for the welcome. Times have been—" His eyes, the clear blue of a winter sky, glanced toward the desolate landscape. "Difficult?" she offered. "That's one word for it." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're going on our 3rd month without proper rain." Wilhelmina felt the weight of reality crushing against her chest. "Your letters didn't mention a drought." Logan Andrews shifted uncomfortably. "It hadn't started when I wrote to you. By the time it got bad." He paused, looking genuinely troubled. "I feared you might not come if you knew." The honesty in his admission was unexpected. Wilhelmina had encountered enough deceitful men in Boston society to recognize when someone was struggling to tell the truth. There was no slickness in his manner, only the straightforward awkwardness of a man unaccustomed to explaining himself. "I see," she said, unsure whether to be angry or grateful for his candor now. He gestured toward a wagon parked nearby, the horses looking nearly as tired as she felt. "My ranch is about 5 miles out. It's not much to look at right now, but Mr. Andrews," she interrupted, needing to say what was pressing on her mind. "I came here expecting to marry a prosperous rancher. I'm not sure what I've found instead." His expression fell, but he nodded. "That's fair. And if you want to turn around and head back east, I'll understand. I can arrange passage back to Boston once the next stage comes through in 3 days." The offer surprised her. She had spent every penny she had to make this journey. If he was offering to pay for her return without protest, perhaps there was honor in him after all. "And if I stay?" she asked, the question escaping before she could consider its implications. Logan looked at her then, really looked at her as if seeing not just the city woman with her inappropriate traveling clothes and exhausted expression, but something more. "Then we'll pray and plant together," he said simply, the words carrying a weight of determination that made her breath catch. "The rain will come again. It always does." Something in his voice, the absolute certainty mixed with humility, touched something inside Wilhelmina. She had not expected poetry from a cattle rancher, yet those 6 words contained more honest hope than all the flowery promises she had heard in Boston drawing rooms. "Well," she said, straightening her spine and lifting her chin, "I didn't come all this way to turn back at the first sign of trouble." For the first time, a genuine smile transformed his face. "No, madam, I don't believe you did." He reached for her bags. "May I?" She nodded, releasing her tight grip on the satchel. As they climbed into the wagon, she noticed the careful way he handled her belongings, as if they were precious cargo. The sun beat down mercilessly as they began the journey to what was supposed to become her home. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. 200 acres, though only about 60 are good for growing. The rest is grazing land for the cattle." He glanced at her. "Had about 30 head before the drought. Down to 18 now." "You've had to sell them?" His knuckles whitened on the reins. "Some died. The others I sold at a loss to keep the rest fed. Couldn't bear to watch them starve." The pain in his voice was raw and real. This was a man who cared deeply for the animals in his charge. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Not your burden to bear." He guided the horses around a particularly rough patch in the road. "If I stay, it will be," she replied. Logan looked at her then, surprise evident in his expression. "Miss Hartwell, I want to be clear. The arrangement we discussed in our letters, I won't hold you to it, not with things as they are." "You mean our marriage?" He nodded, eyes back on the road. "Wouldn't be right to bind you to a failing ranch." Wilhelmina considered his words. The decent thing would be to release her from their agreement given the changed circumstances. But there was something about his quiet dignity, the way he faced adversity head-on, that intrigued her. "Let me see the ranch first," she said. "Then we can discuss our arrangement." As they crested a small rise, Wilhelmina got her first glimpse of the Andrews ranch. A modest 2-story house stood against the backdrop of rolling hills, a barn and several outbuildings nearby. In another time, with green pastures and flourishing fields, it might have been beautiful. Now, it looked beaten down by the relentless sun, the surrounding land cracked and barren. "It's not much," Logan said, a note of apology in his voice. "It's yours," she replied. "That's something to be proud of." He looked at her with surprise, as if he hadn't expected understanding. "My father built the house. I added on the 2nd story and the well house 3 years back." As they drew closer, Wilhelmina noticed signs of careful maintenance despite the harsh conditions. The house was weathered but sturdy, the porch swept clean, the windows intact and clear. "Do you live here alone?" she asked. "My foreman, Ezra Wilson, has a cabin about a 1/4 mile west. Good man. Been with me since my father passed 6 years ago." The wagon pulled up to the house, and before Logan could come around to help her, the front door swung open. A woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on a worn apron. "Mrs. Donnelly," Logan called out, "this is Miss Hartwell from Boston." The older woman's face softened slightly. "About time you arrived. This one's been pacing like a caged mountain lion for days." She extended a hand. "Martha Donnelly. I keep house and cook when these men let me." Wilhelmina took the offered hand, finding it rough with calluses, but the grip warm. "Pleased to meet you. I hope my arrival hasn't caused too much trouble." "Trouble?" Martha snorted. "This place could use a woman's touch, and perhaps someone to remind Mr. Andrews that a person needs more than coffee and determination to live on." Logan shook his head, a hint of fondness in his expression. "Mrs. Donnelly comes in 3 days a week from town. Thinks I'll waste away without her cooking." "And you would," the older woman retorted before turning back to Wilhelmina. "Come inside, dear. You must be parched from the journey." The interior of the house surprised Wilhelmina. While simple, it was clean and well-ordered, with solid furniture that spoke of craftsmanship rather than luxury. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a kitchen visible beyond. A staircase led to what she assumed were bedrooms on the 2nd floor. "I've prepared the spare room for you," Martha said, leading her toward the stairs. "Mr. Andrews insisted you have your own space to consider things." The consideration touched Wilhelmina more than grand gestures might have. This was a man who respected her enough to give her space and time to decide. The bedroom was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, and a small chest of drawers. A window looked out over the parched fields, and in the distance she could make out the silhouettes of cattle gathered near what must have been a water source. "I'll leave you to freshen up," Martha said. "Supper will be ready in an hour." Left alone, Wilhelmina sank onto the bed, the reality of her situation washing over her. She had come to marry a prosperous rancher, and instead found a struggling man fighting against the elements to save what was his. The prudent choice would be to accept his offer to return east. But where would she go? Her parents were dead, their fortune lost to her father's poor investments. The relatives who had taken her in made it clear she was a burden. The advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed a desperate gamble, but one with the promise of independence and perhaps, eventually, affection. Looking out at the harsh landscape, Wilhelmina made a decision. 3 days. She would give this place and Logan Andrews 3 days before deciding whether to stay or return east. When she came downstairs, she found Logan at the kitchen pump, washing the dust from his hands and face. He straightened when he saw her, reaching for a towel. "Miss Hartwell, I hope the room is satisfactory." "It's lovely, thank you." She hesitated, then continued. "Mr. Andrews, I'd like to propose something." His expression turned wary. "Yes?" 3 days, she said firmly. "Give me 3 days to see what life here is truly like. Then I'll make my decision about whether to stay or return east." Relief washed over his features. "That seems fair." "But," she continued, "I want to truly understand what I would be agreeing to. Not just the house and the land, but the work, the challenges, everything." Logan studied her for a long moment. "Ranch life isn't easy in the best of times, Miss Hartwell, and these are far from the best. I'm aware, but I didn't come west looking for an easy life. I came looking for an honest one." Something shifted in his expression then, a new respect kindling in his eyes. "All right. Starting tomorrow, I'll show you exactly what you'd be getting yourself into." Martha called them to supper then, a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and preserved peaches. As they ate, Wilhelmina asked questions about the ranch, the town, and the people nearby. Logan answered openly, neither exaggerating the prospects nor minimizing the difficulties. "The drought's hit everyone hard," he explained. "Some folks have already packed up and left. Others are hanging on, hoping for rain." "And you?" she asked. "This land was my father's, and his father's before him. Andrew's men don't give up easily." He paused, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Though I understand if you decide it's not worth the risk." "Tell me about the town," she said, changing the subject. "Clearwater's small. 1 church, 1 school, general store, saloon. Doctor visits once a month from the bigger settlement 50 miles north. Most folks are ranchers or farmers with a few tradesmen." He smiled slightly. "Mrs. Donnelly's husband is the blacksmith." "Best in 3 counties, Martha added proudly. As the evening progressed, Wilhelmina found herself drawn into their world, their concerns becoming real to her in a way they hadn't been before. When she finally retired to her room, her mind was filled with thoughts of water tables and cattle breeds and crop rotation, things she'd never considered in her previous life. The next morning dawned hot and clear, the sun already fierce by the time Wilhelmina dressed in her simplest skirt and blouse. She found Logan in the barn, where he was examining the hoof of a chestnut mare. "Good morning," she called, startling him slightly. "Miss Hartwell." He straightened, looking surprised to see her up so early. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough, and please, if we're to spend 3 days learning about each other, I think you should call me Wilhelmina." She smiled slightly. "Or Willa, if you prefer. Most people find my full name rather cumbersome." "Willa," he repeated as if testing the sound. "It suits you. And I shall call you Logan, if that's acceptable." He nodded, a hint of color touching his tanned cheeks. "I promise to show you ranch life. Are you ready to begin?" "I am." What followed was a day unlike any Wilhelmina had experienced. Logan showed her the entire operation, from the cattle pastures to the empty fields where crops should have been growing, from the small orchard of struggling apple trees to the carefully maintained windmill that still drew water from deep underground, though the level was dropping dangerously. "The windmill's what's keeping us alive," he explained as they stood in its shadow. "Without it, the cattle would be dead already. But if the water table drops much further—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Wilhelmina understood the precariousness of their situation. "What did you plant before the drought?" she asked as they walked along the edge of a barren field. "Wheat mainly, some corn, vegetables for our use." He squinted at the horizon. "Had plans to expand, try some new strains the agricultural college recommended." "You keep up with such things?" He looked almost embarrassed. "I read whatever I can get my hands on. The general store keeps a few farming journals, and I subscribe to 1 or 2 publications." Wilhelmina filed away this information. Logan Andrews was not just a man of physical strength, but of curiosity and intelligence as well. It made him more interesting than she had anticipated. By midday, the heat was oppressive. Logan led her back to the house where Martha had left cold tea and sandwiches. They ate in the relative coolness of the kitchen. The silence between them no longer awkward, but companionable. "What did you do in Boston?" Logan asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "I helped manage my father's household after my mother died, and I taught piano to a few young girls from good families." "You play then?" She nodded. "It was considered an essential accomplishment for young ladies of my station." "I've never heard a piano in person," he admitted. "Only when I went to Denver once and heard music coming from a hotel." The admission struck her as profoundly sad somehow. "If I stay," she found herself saying, "perhaps we could get a small piano, eventually." Logan looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "If you stay, Willa, I'd make sure you had whatever would make this place feel like home to you." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected pragmatism from this man, not sentiment. Before she could respond, a shout from outside drew their attention. A rider was approaching at speed, dust billowing behind him. Logan was on his feet instantly, moving to the door with a tension she hadn't seen in him before. "It's Ezra," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Something must be wrong." They stepped onto the porch as the foreman reined in his lathered horse. Ezra Wilson was a wiry man in his 40s, with a weathered face and quick, intelligent eyes that assessed Wilhelmina even as he addressed Logan. "Sorry to interrupt, boss. Miss." He tipped his hat briefly toward her. "The south pasture fence is down. Strays got in overnight, mixing with our herd, and they don't look healthy." Logan's expression darkened. "How many?" "Dozen or so. Skinner's brand." The name seemed to mean something significant as Logan's jaw tightened. "Damn, he knows those cattle are sick. He's been trying to offload them for weeks." "Looks deliberate to me," Ezra agreed grimly. "Cut wire, not broken." Wilhelmina watched as Logan's face hardened into lines of anger and determination. "Get the men. We need to separate them before ours get infected." Ezra nodded, then hesitated. "It's just Jenkins and me today. Everyone else is over at the Crawfords helping with their barn raising." Logan cursed under his breath, then seemed to remember Wilhelmina's presence. "I apologize, Willa, but this is an emergency. If those sick cattle stay mixed with ours—" "Go," she said immediately. "Do what you must." He looked at her gratefully. "I don't know how long this will take." "I'll be here." After they left, Wilhelmina found herself alone in the unfamiliar house. Rather than retreating to her room, she decided to make herself useful. Martha had left dough rising for bread, so Wilhelmina finished the task, finding a strange satisfaction in the physical work of kneading and shaping the loaves. As she worked, she thought about what she had learned so far. Logan Andrews was a man fighting against terrible odds to keep his legacy alive. He was educated enough to read agricultural journals, gentle enough to care deeply for his animals, and honorable enough to offer her a way out of their arrangement when circumstances changed. And there was something else, something in the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled rarely. In the careful way he explained things without condescension, in the quiet strength he carried without arrogance. Something that made her wonder what it might be like to build a life with such a man, drought or no drought. It was well after dark when Logan returned, looking exhausted beyond measure. Wilhelmina had kept supper warm, and she quickly set it before him as he collapsed into a chair. "You didn't need to wait up," he said, though gratitude was evident in his voice. "I wanted to." She poured him coffee, strong and black as she'd seen him take it that morning. "Were you able to separate the cattle?" "Yes, but not before some of ours were exposed." He rubbed a hand over his face. "We'll know in a few days if they caught whatever Skinner's herd has. Might lose more than we can afford to." The defeat in his voice moved her. "This Skinner, he did this deliberately?" Logan's expression hardened. "Jefferson Skinner has been trying to buy out smaller ranchers for years. When we won't sell, he finds ways to make life difficult." He shook his head. "But cutting fences and risking diseased cattle spreading to healthy herds, that's a new low, even for him." "Can't you report him to the authorities?" A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Sheriff's his brother-in-law, and without witnesses, it would be his word against mine." Wilhelmina felt outrage building inside her. "That's unconscionable. That's the way of things sometimes." Logan sighed, the anger seeming to drain out of him, leaving only fatigue. "I'm sorry you had to see this side of ranch life so soon." "Don't apologize. I asked to see everything, remember?" She sat across from him, watching as he ate the simple meal she had prepared. "Will you confront him?" "Skinner, no good would come of it. I'll focus on saving my cattle and repairing the fence." He looked up at her. "This probably confirms your decision to return east." Wilhelmina considered her response carefully. "Actually, it makes me more inclined to stay." Surprise flickered across his face. "Why?" "Because I've never been one to retreat from a bully," she said simply. "And because I respect how you're handling this with dignity rather than retaliation." Logan studied her for a long moment, and she felt as if he was seeing beyond her proper Boston upbringing to something deeper. "You're not what I expected, Willa Hartwell." "Is that a complaint?" The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not in the slightest." The following day, Wilhelmina insisted on accompanying Logan on his rounds, despite his protests that she should rest after yesterday's exertions. They checked on the cattle first, Logan examining each animal carefully for signs of illness. "What exactly does this disease do?" she asked as they rode slowly along the fence line. "Starts with lethargy, then fever. Eventually affects the lungs. Cattle die gasping for breath." His voice was clinical, but she could hear the underlying concern. "Spreads fast if not contained. And if your herd is infected, we quarantine the sick ones and hope for the best." He glanced at her. "Another reason you might want to reconsider staying. Disease can spread to humans sometimes." She straightened in the saddle of the gentle mare he had provided for her. "I nursed my mother through consumption, Mr. Andrews. I'm not afraid of illness." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "No, I don't suppose you are." They continued their inspection, moving on to check the repaired fence. Logan explained how the ranch operated in normal times, and Wilhelmina found herself asking questions about crop rotation, cattle breeding, and water management subjects she would never have imagined discussing a week ago. As the day progressed, they rode further from the main house, eventually stopping at a small creek bed. It was dry now, just a ribbon of cracked earth winding through the landscape. "This used to run year-round," Logan said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "Even in dry years, there was always at least a trickle. Never seen it completely dry before." Wilhelmina walked along the edge of the creek bed, imagining how different the land would look with flowing water. "When do the rains usually come?" "Should have started a month ago." He looked up at the cloudless sky. "Weather patterns have been changing these past few years. Old-timers say it's part of a bigger cycle, that the rains will return eventually." "And you believe them?" "Have to," he said simply. "Faith and hope are about all that keep a rancher going sometimes." They sat in the shade of a lone cottonwood tree, sharing the lunch Martha had packed for them. The conversation flowed more easily now, moving beyond the ranch to personal histories. Logan told her about growing up as an only child, learning ranching from his father, and his dreams of expanding the operation someday. "What about you?" he asked. "What dreams brought you all the way from Boston to marry a stranger?" Wilhelmina considered the question. "Independence primarily. After my parents died, I was dependent on the charity of relatives who made it clear I was unwelcome." She looked out at the harsh landscape. I wanted something that was mine, a place where I belonged because I had chosen it, not because I was tolerated out of obligation. And did you ever consider marriage back east? She smiled wryly. There were suitors before my father's financial troubles. Afterward, not so many. Their loss? Logan said quietly, surprising her with the simple statement. As they returned to the house in the late afternoon, Wilhelmina found herself wondering what it might be like to build a life here. The land was unforgiving now, but she could see its potential. And Logan Andrews was a good man, honest, hard-working, and kind in an unassuming way that she found increasingly appealing. That evening, after supper, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular shades of orange and gold. The heat of the day was fading, leaving a pleasant warmth in its wake. "Tomorrow's your last day before deciding," Logan said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Is there anything specific you want to see or know before you make your choice?" Wilhelmina considered the question. "Tell me about the town. I'd like to know what kind of community I'd be joining." He nodded. "We can ride in tomorrow. It's market day, so most folks will be around." "I'd appreciate that." Another silence fell, but it wasn't awkward. There was something restful about sitting beside this quiet man, watching darkness claim the land. "May I ask you something, Willa?" Logan's voice was hesitant. "Of course." "What would make you stay?" "Truly?" The directness of the question caught her off guard, but she appreciated his honesty. "I need to believe I can make a meaningful life here, that there's potential for happiness." She turned to look at him. "And I need to know that we could build something together, not just as business partners in a convenient arrangement, but as true companions." Logan considered her words carefully. "I can't promise riches or an easy life, but I can promise that you would never be merely convenient to me." He met her gaze steadily. "I would strive every day to be worthy of your choice to stay." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. This was not a man given to flowery declarations or false promises. When Logan Andrews gave his word, she sensed it was unbreakable. "Thank you for your honesty," she said softly. Before either could say more, a sound caught their attention, the faint rumble of thunder in the distance. Logan was on his feet instantly, scanning the horizon where the last light was fading. There, he pointed to the northwest, where dark clouds were gathering. "Could be a thunderstorm brewing." Wilhelmina felt his excitement and tried to temper her own. "Does that mean rain?" "Maybe. These summer storms can be fickle. Sometimes they bring rain, sometimes just lightning and wind." He couldn't keep the hope from his voice. "But it's the first real chance in weeks." They stood together watching the clouds build in the distance, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating their edges. The air felt different suddenly, charged with possibility. "Should we prepare somehow?" Wilhelmina asked. Logan nodded, seemingly grateful for something to do with the energy suddenly coursing through him. "We should secure anything that might blow away and get the rain barrels in position. If we're lucky enough to get a downpour, we need to catch every drop." They worked together in the growing darkness, moving light furniture from the porch, positioning barrels beneath the downspouts, and checking that all the animals were secured in the barn. Ezra rode in from his cabin to help, and soon everything was ready. The storm took its time approaching, the thunder growing louder as the wind began to pick up. Wilhelmina felt the first cool gust against her skin like a benediction after weeks of relentless heat. "It's coming," Logan said, standing beside her on the porch, his voice tight with controlled hope. "God willing, it's coming with rain." The first fat droplets hit the dust with audible plops, instantly swallowed by the thirsty earth. Then more came, and more, until suddenly the heavens opened and rain poured down in sheets. Logan let out a whoop of joy, a sound so uninhibited and boyish that Wilhelmina couldn't help but laugh. "Come on," he shouted over the downpour, grabbing her hand. Before she could protest, he was pulling her down the porch steps and into the rain. The water was shockingly cold against her heated skin, instantly soaking through her clothes. For a moment, she stood frozen in surprise, then found herself lifting her face to the sky, letting the rain wash over her. Logan was watching her, his own face lifted to the deluge, rain streaming down his features. In that moment, with joy transforming him and gratitude evident in every line of his body, Wilhelmina thought she had never seen a more handsome man. "Thank you, Lord," he shouted to the sky, turning in a slow circle with his arms outstretched. The pure, unabashed joy of the moment swept through Wilhelmina. Here was a man who could find profound gratitude in a rainstorm, who worked tirelessly against impossible odds, who offered honesty when deception would have been easier. In that moment, soaked to the skin and laughing in the pouring rain, Wilhelmina Hartwell made her decision. The storm continued through the night, the blessed rain falling steadily for hours. By morning, the parched earth had soaked up much of the moisture, but puddles remained as evidence of the deluge, and the air smelled fresh and renewed. Wilhelmina woke early, dressing carefully in her best traveling dress, not for departure, but because today seemed significant in ways she couldn't fully articulate. When she descended the stairs, she found Logan already awake, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the transformed landscape. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her. "You're dressed for travel," he noted, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm dressed for an important day," she corrected. "You promised to show me the town, remember?" Hope flickered across his features. "Then you haven't decided to leave?" "On the contrary," Wilhelmina said, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've decided to stay." Logan set his coffee cup down with a clatter. "You're sure? Even with everything, the drought, Skinner, the uncertainty." "The drought broke last night," she pointed out with a small smile. "As for the rest, you said it yourself. We'll pray and plant together." She took a deep breath. "If you still want me as your wife, Logan Andrews, I accept your proposal." In 2 strides, he was before her, taking her hands in his. Up close, she could see the emotion in his eyes, relief, joy, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "I want nothing more," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "But I need you to be certain, Willa. This life won't be easy." "Few worthwhile things are," she replied. "I came here looking for a new beginning. I found it in you." The smile that transformed his face then was worth every mile she had traveled. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, Logan leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss that held both promise and restraint. When they parted, his eyes searched hers. "We should still go to town," he said. "If you're to be Mrs. Andrews, you should meet your neighbors, and we'll need to speak with the Reverend about the wedding." "I'd like that." The ride to Clearwater took them through land transformed by the rain. Already there were faint hints of green where seeds long dormant had been awakened by the moisture. Logan pointed out landmarks as they traveled, his voice animated with new hope. "The rain changes everything," he explained. "If we get a few more storms like that, the grass will return for the cattle. We might even be able to plant a late crop of fast-growing vegetables before first frost." Wilhelmina listened, captivated by his renewed energy. "Tell me what I can do to help." "You already have," he said, glancing at her with warmth in his eyes. "Having someone to share the burden, it makes it lighter somehow." They reached town by mid-morning, the single street bustling with activity. The general store had opened its front porch to create an impromptu market, with local farmers and craftspeople displaying their wares on rough tables. The mood was celebratory, the recent rain having lifted everyone's spirits. Logan helped Wilhelmina down from the wagon, keeping her hand in his as they approached the gathering. Heads turned as they walked through the market, curious eyes assessing the newcomer. Logan nodded greetings to several people, occasionally stopping to introduce Wilhelmina. "Miss Hartwell came all the way from Boston," he would explain, a hint of pride in his voice. "She's agreed to be my wife." The reactions varied from obvious surprise to knowing smiles. It seemed Logan's mail-order bride had been a topic of speculation in the small community. "About time you settled down, Andrews," called a bearded man arranging tools on a table. "Lady must have good sense if she picked you." "Or poor eyesight," quipped another, prompting general laughter. Wilhelmina observed the easy camaraderie among the townsfolk, the way they included Logan in their gentle teasing. These were his people, and by extension, they would become hers. As they made their way through the market, a commotion near the saloon drew their attention. A large man with an expensive hat was berating a younger cowboy, his voice carrying across the street. "That's Skinner," Logan said quietly, his body tensing. "Looks like he's found a new target." They watched as the confrontation escalated, Skinner jabbing his finger into the younger man's chest. Before Wilhelmina could ask more questions, Logan was moving toward them, his stride purposeful. "Leave him be, Skinner," Logan called as he approached. "Jenkins works for me now." Skinner turned, his florid face darkening when he saw Logan. "Andrews, should have known you'd pick up my scraps." "Jenkins is a good hand who deserves fair treatment," Logan replied evenly. "Something he clearly wasn't getting from you." The larger man sneered, his gaze shifting to Wilhelmina. "And who's this? Finally found someone desperate enough to take you on?" Wilhelmina felt Logan stiffen beside her, but before he could respond, she stepped forward. "Wilhelmina Hartwell, soon to be Andrews," she said coolly. "And you must be Mr. Skinner. I've heard about your business practices." Skinner's eyes narrowed. "Careful, lady. You don't know what you're talking about." "On the contrary," she replied, maintaining her composure. "I understand you've been trying to drive smaller ranchers out of business through whatever means necessary. Where I come from, sir, that's considered the action of a coward, not a businessman." A hush fell over the onlookers. Logan's hand found hers, squeezing gently in support or warning, she wasn't sure which. Skinner's face mottled with rage. "You'd better teach your woman to hold her tongue, Andrews, before she gets you in deeper trouble than you already are." "My fiancée speaks for herself," Logan replied, his voice calm but steely. "And she's right. Cutting fences and risking diseased cattle infecting healthy herds isn't business. It's criminal." The accusation, spoken openly in front of witnesses, caused a ripple of murmurs among the gathered crowd. Skinner's gaze darted around, noting the suddenly hostile expressions. "You can't prove anything," he blustered. "Perhaps not today," Logan agreed. "But folks around here aren't fools, Skinner. They see what you're doing. And sooner or later you'll go too far, and then all the money in the world won't buy you out of the consequences." For a tense moment, it seemed Skinner might resort to violence. Then, with a muttered curse, he turned and stalked toward the saloon, shouldering roughly past curious onlookers. As he disappeared through the bat-wing doors, the tension broke. Several men approached Logan, clapping him on the back and expressing approval for standing up to the bully. "Been wanting to say something like that for years," an older rancher admitted. "Skinner's been choking the life out of this community since he moved in." Wilhelmina watched as Logan accepted their support with modest grace, neither boasting about the confrontation nor minimizing its significance. This, she realized, was why people respected him not for grand gestures, but for quiet integrity in the face of adversity. Eventually, they made their way to the small, whitewashed church at the end of the street. The reverend, a kindly man with spectacles and a thoughtful manner, greeted them warmly when Logan explained their situation. "A wedding? That's wonderful news," he said, beaming at them. "We could use a celebration around here. When were you thinking?" Logan looked at Wilhelmina questioningly. "I leave the timing to my bride." She considered. There was little reason to wait given the circumstances of her arrival. "Would next Sunday be possible? After the service?" The Reverend nodded approvingly. "A fine choice. I'll announce it tomorrow so everyone can prepare." As they left the church, Wilhelmina felt a strange mixture of nervousness and contentment. In just 1 week, she would become Mrs. Logan Andrews, committing herself to this man and this land for better or worse. "Are you having second thoughts?" Logan asked gently as they walked back toward the wagon. "Not at all," she assured him. "Just contemplating how much my life has changed in a few short days." "Mine too," he admitted, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. For the better. The week leading to their wedding passed in a blur of activity. News of the impending ceremony spread quickly through the small community, and neighbors began arriving at the ranch with gifts and offers of help. Women came to assist with wedding preparations, bringing food, flowers, and advice. Men stopped by to help Logan with ranch work, ensuring he would have time to prepare for his wedding day. Wilhelmina found herself embraced by the community with a warmth she hadn't expected. Martha Donnelly took charge of creating a wedding dress, modifying one of Wilhelmina's better gowns with lace, contributed by several women in town. Others brought preserves, quilts, and household items as wedding gifts. "Never seen folks so stirred up about a wedding," Logan commented one evening as they sat on the porch, enjoying the cooler air that had come with the recent rains. "Think they're just happy to have something to celebrate after the hard times." "Or perhaps they're happy for you," Wilhelmina suggested. "They seem quite fond of you, Logan." He looked embarrassed by the observation. "We look out for each other out here. Has to be that way." Another rainstorm came midweek, gentler than the first, but steady and nourishing. Logan and Ezra worked from dawn to dusk, preparing fields for late planting, the hope of at least some harvest before winter driving their efforts. Wilhelmina found ways to make herself useful, learning the rhythm of ranch life from Martha and beginning to put her own touch on the house that would soon be her home. She cleaned rarely used rooms, arranged her belongings, and started a small herb garden near the kitchen door with seeds Martha provided. On the Sunday morning of their wedding, Wilhelmina woke to sunshine streaming through her window and the distant sound of birds. She dressed carefully in the modified gown, which now boasted delicate lace trim and a blue ribbon at the waist. "Something borrowed and something blue," Martha had explained with a wink. A knock at her door revealed Martha herself, come to help with final preparations. The older woman's eyes misted as she took in the sight of Wilhelmina in her wedding finery. "You look beautiful, child," she said, fussing with the arrangement of Wilhelmina's hair. "Logan won't know what hit him." "Is he nervous?" Wilhelmina asked, surprised to find her own hands trembling slightly as she pinned a small brooch, her mother's, the one valuable thing she had kept to her bodice. "Nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs," Martha chuckled. "Been up since dawn, pacing and checking his suit for the 100th time. Ezra finally took him for a walk just to settle him down." The thought of stoic, steady Logan being nervous about their wedding touched Wilhelmina deeply. This was no mere business arrangement for him either then. They arrived at the church to find it transformed. Wildflowers gathered from across the countryside filled simple jars along the aisle, and someone had cleaned and polished every surface until it gleamed. The pews were filled with people, many of whom Wilhelmina had only just met, all dressed in their Sunday best. Logan waited at the altar, looking handsome and somewhat uncomfortable in a dark suit that was clearly reserved for special occasions. When he turned and saw her walking toward him, the expression that crossed his face, wonder, joy, and something like reverence, made every doubt or fear she might have harbored vanish completely. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows in clear voices that carried through the small church, promising to love, honor, and cherish one another through whatever life might bring. When Logan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a surprise as she hadn't known he had managed to procure a ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared, beaming at them. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Logan's kiss was gentle but held a promise that made Wilhelmina blush as the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed spilled out of the church and into the town square, where tables had been set up laden with food contributed by everyone in the community. There was music from a fiddle and harmonica, dancing, and more laughter than Wilhelmina had heard in years. As the sun began to set, Casting golden light across the festivities, Logan found her sitting with some of the older women, listening to their stories of early days in the territory. "May I steal my wife for a dance?" he asked, extending his hand with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Husband," Wilhelmina said, testing the word as she placed her hand in his. "It still seems strange to say." "Strange in a good way, I hope," he replied, leading her to the area where others were dancing to a lively tune. "The best way," she assured him. They moved together to the music, Logan proving to be a more accomplished dancer than she had expected. As they twirled among their neighbors, Wilhelmina felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since long before her parents' deaths. These people, this place, they were becoming hers, and she theirs. "Happy?" Logan asked softly, his arms secure around her waist as the music slowed. "Very," she replied honestly. "Are you?" His eyes, warm in the golden evening light, held hers. "More than I ever thought possible." Later, as they prepared to leave the celebration, they were showered with good wishes and knowing smiles. The ride back to the ranch, their ranch now, Wilhelmina reminded herself, was quiet, a newfound awareness between them making conversation unnecessary. The house looked different somehow when they arrived, as if acknowledging the change in status of its occupants. Logan helped her down from the wagon with careful hands, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Andrews," he said softly, setting her down in the front room that was illuminated by lamps Martha must have lit before leaving for her own home. "It's really ours now, isn't it?" Wilhelmina said, looking around at what was no longer just Logan's house, but their home. "It is." He took her hands in his. "I want you to know, Willa, that I'll never take for granted what you've chosen to do coming here, staying despite everything, marrying me. I'll spend every day trying to make sure you never regret it." The earnestness in his voice moved her deeply. This was no practiced speech, but the heartfelt promise of a man who meant every word. "Logan," she said, reaching up to touch his face, "I chose this life, chose you because I saw a good man, a man of honor and determination. I don't need grand gestures or riches. I just need you to be the man you already are." Something shifted in his expression then, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'm not sure what I did to deserve you," he said hoarsely, "but I'm grateful." Their kiss was different this time, deeper, and filled with a longing that had been carefully restrained until now. Wilhelmina found herself responding with a passion that might have shocked her proper Boston acquaintances, but felt entirely right in the arms of her husband. That night, they truly became husband and wife in every sense, discovering each other with tenderness and growing ardor. Logan was gentle and considerate, his strength tempered by a deep care for her comfort and pleasure. In his arms, Wilhelmina found a connection she had never imagined possible, a belonging that went beyond the physical to touch something profound within her soul. Afterward, lying in the quiet darkness with her head on Logan's chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart, she whispered, "I think I might be falling in love with you, Logan Andrews." His arms tightened around her. "I know I'm already there, Willa Andrews. Have been since you stood in the pouring rain with your face lifted to the sky, laughing like you'd discovered a miracle." "It was a miracle," she said softly. "The rain, yes. But more than that, finding you, finding this place, finding home." The weeks that followed were busy with work and adjustment to married life. The rains continued intermittently, enough to bring life back to the parched land. Logan and Ezra worked tirelessly to plant whatever might grow before frost, while Wilhelmina took over management of the household and started learning about cattle ranching. There were difficulties, of course. Jefferson Skinner continued his campaign against smaller ranchers, though more subtly now that public opinion had turned against him. Water remained a concern, despite the improved rainfall. And the threat of early frost hung over their late-planted crops. But there were joys, too. The first green shoots pushing through the soil in fields that had been barren, the cattle growing healthier on reviving grasslands, and most importantly, the deepening bond between Wilhelmina and Logan as they faced each challenge together. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Logan surprised her with a covered wagon rolling up the drive. At her questioning look, he merely smiled and squeezed her hand. When the wagon stopped before the house, two men carefully unloaded a small upright piano, weathered but lovingly polished. "Logan," Wilhelmina breathed, hardly believing her eyes. "Founded in Junction City," he explained, looking pleased with her reaction. "Belonged to a family heading to California who couldn't take it with them. Had Ezra and Jenkins pick it up today while you were in town with Martha." Tears pricked at Wilhelmina's eyes. "But how did you afford it? With everything we need for the ranch?" "Some things are worth more than their cost," he said simply. "You mentioned once that playing piano brought you joy. I want joy in our home, Willa." The men carried the piano into the house, positioning it where Logan directed in the corner of the main room. When they had gone, Wilhelmina sat at the small bench, running her fingers reverently over the keys. The instrument needed tuning, but when she played a simple melody, the sound filled the house with warmth. Logan watched her from the doorway, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Will it do?" In answer, she rose and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "It's perfect. Thank you." "Play something for me," he requested, and she did, filling their home with music as the last light faded from the sky. Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness, Wilhelmina gathered her courage to share news she had been keeping to herself until she was certain. "Logan," she said softly, taking his hand and placing it low on her abdomen, "I believe we're going to have a child." He went utterly still for a moment, then propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her, his expression a mixture of awe and concern, visible even in the dim light. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "As sure as I can be. It's early yet, but all the signs are there." "A baby," he breathed, his hand still resting gently where she had placed it. "Our baby." "Are you pleased?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. In answer, he kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to her eyes. "Please doesn't begin to cover it," he said when they parted. "But Willa, are you? This life is hard enough without the demands of motherhood." "I'm happier than I've ever been," she assured him. "Scared too, of course, but mostly happy." He gathered her close, his protective instinct evident in the way he held her. "We'll need to make preparations. The doctor should visit soon, and the house we should finish that second bedroom properly. And," she laughed softly, pressing a finger to his lips, "we have time. The baby won't come until spring." "Spring," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "New life, just when the land wakes up again." As autumn progressed into winter, the Andrews ranch prepared for both the coming cold and the expected child. Logan worked with renewed purpose, the knowledge that he would soon be a father driving him to secure their future. The late crops had yielded enough to see them through winter, and the cattle had recovered from the drought, though their numbers remained smaller than before. Wilhelmina's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing gradually as the child within her grew. The community embraced the news with joy, women visiting regularly with advice, hand-sewn baby clothes, and offers of help when the time came. Even Martha Donnelly softened, her usual brisk manner giving way to almost grandmotherly concern for Wilhelmina's health. Christmas came, bringing with it a celebration unlike any Wilhelmina had experienced. The small church was decorated with pine boughs and handmade ornaments. The entire community gathered for a service, followed by a shared feast. Gifts were simple but meaningful knitted items, preserved foods, practical tools. Logan gave Wilhelmina a rocking chair he had commissioned from a craftsman in town, and she presented him with a hand-embroidered shirt she had been working on in secret for weeks. "It's beautiful," he said, running his fingers over the careful stitching. "Far too fine for a rancher like me." "Nonsense," she replied. "It's precisely fine enough for my husband." Winter brought challenges, bitter cold, occasional blizzards that isolated them for days, and the constant work of keeping animals fed and protected from the elements. But it brought closeness too. Long evenings by the fire with Logan reading aloud while Wilhelmina worked on baby clothes, or teaching him to play simple tunes on the piano, their laughter filling the warm house. In late January, Jefferson Skinner finally overplayed his hand. Caught red-handed attempting to divert a creek that provided water to several smaller properties, he faced not just local condemnation, but legal consequences. The territorial governor, alerted by a coalition of ranchers including Logan, sent officials to investigate the numerous complaints against Skinner. The resulting fines and restrictions crippled his ability to continue his predatory practices. "It won't stop him completely," Logan told Wilhelmina after returning from a town meeting about the situation. "Men like that always find new angles. But it gives us breathing room, and it shows what can happen when people stand together." By early spring, the land was awakening from winter's grip. New grass sprouted in the pastures, and Logan and Ezra worked from dawn to dusk preparing fields for planting. Wilhelmina, now in her final month of pregnancy, divided her time between household management and resting as her body demanded. The baby came on a perfect April day, when wildflowers were just beginning to dot the landscape. The labor was long and difficult, with Martha Donnelly and 2 other women from town attending, while Logan paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. Finally, as the sun was setting, the cry of a newborn pierced the air, followed shortly by Martha's triumphant announcement. "A girl, healthy as can be." When Logan was finally allowed to enter, he found Wilhelmina exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly, her eyes never leaving the infant's face. Logan approached almost reverently, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. When Wilhelmina placed the baby in his arms, his expression of wonder and fierce protectiveness made her heart swell with love for them both. "She's perfect," he whispered, one large finger gently stroking the baby's velvet cheek. "Just like her mother." They named her Hope, a testament to the faith that had brought them through drought and hardship to this moment of perfect joy. In the days that followed, Logan could scarcely be persuaded to leave their side, watching over them with a devotion that touched Wilhelmina deeply. As spring turned to summer, the Andrews ranch flourished. The fields were planted, the cattle healthy, and the house filled with the sounds of family life. Wilhelmina recovered her strength gradually, learning to balance motherhood with her role as Logan's partner in managing the ranch. She taught piano to several children from town who came for lessons once a week, finding joy in sharing her music with others. On the anniversary of her arrival, Logan surprised her by taking her to the spot where they had first seen the dry creek bed the year before. Now, water flowed steadily through it, nurturing wildflowers along its banks. "Remember what this looked like when you first saw it?" he asked as they stood hand in hand, baby Hope sleeping peacefully in a sling across Wilhelmina's chest. "Barren, hopeless," she recalled, like a symbol of everything that seemed impossible then. "And now?" He smiled down at her, the lines around his eyes deepened by a year of both challenges and laughter. "Now it's a reminder that life returns," she said, leaning against his solid strength. "That faith and perseverance matter." Logan's arms circled her waist, drawing her and their daughter closer. "When you stepped off that stagecoach a year ago, I was terrified you'd turn right around and leave once you saw what you'd gotten yourself into." "I nearly did," she admitted with a smile, "until a certain cowboy said something that gave me hope. 'Then we'll pray and plant together,'" he quoted his own words, shaking his head. "Not exactly poetry." "It was exactly what I needed to hear," she corrected him, "a promise that whatever came, we would face it side by side. And we have, haven't we?" "We have," he agreed, bending to kiss her softly. "And we will." As they made their way back to the ranch, their home, Wilhelmina reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From desperate mail-order bride to beloved wife and mother, From Boston society to Wyoming ranch life, she had transformed as surely as the land around them had recovered from drought. Logan Andrews had promised her they would pray and plant together, and in doing so, they had cultivated not just crops and cattle, but love and family and community. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but standing beside the man she loved, with their daughter sleeping against her heart and their land flourishing around them, Wilhelmina knew it was exactly the life she was meant to have. From drought had come abundance. From uncertainty had come purpose, and from the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier had come the greatest blessing of all, the love that now sustained them through whatever seasons might come.